Sometimes if we're lucky, we come back and we get to see the rewards or the successes. I feel very lucky. I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to come back 25 years later and to see how far you have come and all you have accomplished. You have not only had an impact as an association. When I see this group this morning, and I see this over 100 people in here right now, and I remember Port Ledlow, we had maybe 30, maybe 40 people. You've come a long way. You served your association. You served, most importantly, your students. And your support in the national arena and the policy arena of Washington. You have come a long way. After agreeing to attend the meeting, David and I arranged to meet in Seattle, where we took a cab to a small hotel somewhere in downtown Seattle. And I assumed that's where the meeting was going to take place. I didn't know anybody at NASP. I didn't know Pearl at that time. At the hotel that evening, we met up with Silas Purnell, who was then director of the Townsend's program in Chicago, the Ida McKinley Center. Many of you know Silas. At that point that night, somewhere over dinner or something, I realized that the meeting was not going to take place in that hotel, but that in the morning we were going to go pick up a GSA car and drive to the resort where it was going to take place. The next morning, after picking up the car, we drove to Peggy Teal's office, and I was coming in early in the morning. She had this fabulous view of the city or the water, whatever. And after leaving Peggy's office and having picked up the GSA car, we went over to where, I didn't know where we were going. I knew there was a ship. And lo and behold, David drives into the ship. Well, after what seemed like, and I think it was pretty close to it, like a 2-hour trip on the ferry, we arrived and drove through some woods. Somewhere along there, I'm thinking, if David had not picked me up in Seattle, met me at the airport, how in the world would I have gotten to Port Ledlow, where I was supposed to help organize the association? You see, I hadn't seen a cap since Seattle. And if I hadn't seen a cap, I didn't have the money to pay for it anyway. So all these little things, you go through. And again, I'm sharing this because this is what we were going through back then. Well, at Port Ledlow, we got there, and I met Pearl for the very first time. A friendship that lasted a lifetime. We became good friends, and later traveled all over the country doing trio business, organizing, and so on and so forth. Pearl was a real funny person, for those of you who knew her. And there were many stories I could share with you, but I think I'll probably take all day. But we used to kid her, because in those days we were not that serious. I hope I'm not that serious either this morning, but we used to kid with each other and joke and everything else. I remember Pearl, we would sit in those meetings till 3 in the morning, and Pearl would come in with chips and Fritos and peanuts and everything else, and then a Diet Coke. I said, Pearl, what does that mean? And she was like, oh shit. That was one of her favorite words. But I met Pearl that day. I'll never forget her. And there were some people across the country who didn't agree with Pearl at all times, and they used to, when they saw me, they said, "You're Pearl's friend." I said, "Yes, I am." Because in trio we are so independent, and we can work together, but we can also disagree, but hopefully not on a permanent basis. Anyway, so we got to Port Ledlow, and I met Pearl. So those people at the meeting were there that had been called in. Ron McKinley was the town social director from Minnesota, and David had also called him. Cy Purnell was going to be a presenter. Peggy Teal from the Office of Education was there, and others were there. But we got there, and Ron and I were the ones to sort of facilitate the meeting. And so we sat with Pearl, and we sat with some of her colleagues, and we asked them, okay, Pearl, what is it that you want? What do you want to do? This is what we're doing nationally, but what do you want to do? And you'd be surprised, the goals were very modest. They were very basic. Pearl and her colleagues told us, we just want to be able to talk to each other. We just want to be able to come together. We want to be able to share resources. We want to be able to dialogue on common issues related to our programs. We want to speak with one voice. We want to be able to do what you guys are doing in the Southwest, Mid-America, and New England. That's what we want to do. I said, well, that's easy. They wanted to ensure that the continued existence of the peer programs that promoted equal opportunity. They wanted an association or a vehicle or a group that would convey your concerns individually, statewide, and regionally. They wanted to be able to convey those concerns with one voice at the national level. That's what they wanted. Simple enough, huh? Once the meeting started, it was obvious that there were some people who were not interested in doing that. There were some that questioned us, questioned Pearl. But in all honesty, it was perhaps they did not understand the big picture. Maybe they didn't understand what was happening, what could happen to them if we didn't organize. Perhaps some people were suspect of us outsiders coming in to tell them or to share with them what we were doing. Maybe some people didn't like Pearl when they went to embarrass her in front of the national folks. Be as it may, they were there and they made their position known very forcefully. And to be honest, I was a little bit surprised by that because while we had been in other parts of the country organizing, we had discussions on issues and concerns, but there was never a question on the need to organize. It was always, yes, we need to get together. But so I'll say the following: we were in a meeting, and you understand we didn't have conference rooms. None of us, NASP or we couldn't afford this. We couldn't afford this, so we would meet in a street, somebody's street, whatever. We had little rooms to go to, but it was after hours or after dinner, and everybody was sitting on the floor on sofas and benches, and somebody was pouring the wine, and so we started. That was the forum that we were given to discuss forming an association. After some wine and some lively discussions, a lot of wine and a lot of lively discussions. At some point, I realized we're not going anywhere. We began to argue and we're blah, blah, blah. So, I was younger and I was braver and more foolish. And I remember telling the group, look, for those of you who are serious about forming a tree association, we're going to another room. We're going to another room for those of you who are serious, and we're not going to have liquor. We're not going to have no liquor in that room. By the time it was in the evening, we reconvened in the other street, which was Pearl's bedroom. And we were sitting on top of the bed and top of benches and so on and so forth, and we were there till 3 o'clock in the morning. But when they left, when that group left, when your colleagues left, they had decided this is what we're going to do. And they had an agenda. One of the dilemmas, of course, we didn't have the sophistication we have today when we organize conventions. One of the dilemmas, we were leaving Pearl's room at 3 o'clock in the morning, but the business meeting was at 7 o'clock in the morning. Back then, I could do it, I don't know about today. But the business meeting, motions were made, discussions, but that's when you and the association came together that December morning, 1977. Those present agreed to form an association and to name a committee to continue the development of the association. At that meeting, some of the people, and maybe some of these folks, some of the people that were appointed to committees to carry on some of the work was Pearl Hill. She was the chair. Linda Edwards, Steve Crosby, Mildred O'Leary, Frank White, Pat Reeves, Ellen Ritter, and Bill Wood. Very basically, the purpose of the committee was to organize themselves, to put conferences such as the ones you have here today, to relay matters of concern to the membership, and to make regional decisions, and to recommend from this region to the national group your concerns. The committee also agreed to send a representative to New Orleans, which became one of the very historic meetings for the national group. Notice I said the committee agreed to send, as if we had the money to pay for it. Pearl was there, and she represented you well at that very important meeting. We had other meetings, and that was the beginning in New Orleans of another point in our development. But like any other venture group that is starting, organizing a regional association was no picnic. It didn't happen overnight or without sacrifices, without disappointments or disagreements. But everyone involved at Port Ledlow was committed. And thus they were able to see beyond the distractions, and they pressed forward. They pressed forward for two reasons. They were focused and they were determined to make it work. They were focused and determined to make it work. Those 40 or so people that met there with Pearl were the pioneers that launched URU. See, they had a vision. They had a vision, but they also knew the sacrifices. They knew basically three things. They knew that it was going to take a long time before we could come to a reality that, one, we had the association, and two, that the students in your region would have access to opportunity in America. They knew that. They knew about the sacrifices. They knew about the things that happened. So those founders were talking, they knew that it was going to take a long time. Second thing they knew was that it would be a very expensive venture. And I know you say money. No, that was part of it. But they knew it was going to be expensive in your sacrifices that you make, both personal and professional. How many of you would this morning rather be at home with your children, or tonight with your husbands, or your grandchildren, whatever? But you're here because you're committed. They knew that it would take professional sacrifices. They knew that going up against your dean or your college president or whoever, that would be a sacrifice because it could affect your tenure track. It could affect your job. They knew that. The effort, the time, and of course the money. So Trio folks then and today know that it's a long journey, that it's an expensive journey. We should never forget their deeds, their valor, their sacrifices, or their commitment. Third thing, they knew. They knew they had to do it. They knew, even though it was going to take a long time, it was going to be expensive. They knew the results would be more rewarding than any one of us could imagine. I said earlier, I'm very privileged to be able to come back 25 years later and share with you. So this morning I tried to cover some things that happened. I covered about the work they did, the sacrifices they endured, and their dreams. We come back today or this weekend, and you will honor, you will celebrate, you will provide a scholarship named after your first president. You look at all that history. So this morning I asked, was it worth the work at Port Ledlow 25 years ago? Did they wonder if they could ever make a difference? Did they wonder if they could ever make a difference? Were they even thinking of that? Did they make a difference? Did they make a difference? If the answer is yes, then the question should be, are we done yet? Are we done yet? If the answer is no, then the next question we should ask ourselves is, are we still at work? And are we as committed as the founders were 25 years ago? Are we there? As you celebrate the silver anniversary, as you celebrate the accomplishments of your association, as you reflect on the history, the decisions, and the actions taken by that small group, as you reflect on all these things 25 years later, and as you today continue your work on behalf of your students and your colleagues and your association and your community, as you're now at the plate, it is your turn. The history of the past 25 years. How will history remind you in 25 years?